put you live now.
Good morning, colleagues. Welcome back to week 2 of our webinars. Good morning, colleagues. Welcome back to week 2 of our webinars. Delighted that so many have joined us again this morning. I know that we're pushing over 50 that were waiting for this to start, and I know that last week, if you like your numbers, we had 101 people join the webinar on week 1. So a warm welcome back. I'm delighted to say this week that we've got our colleague Lorna from the Scottish Social Services Council, SSC, to join us to take this week's webinar forward. So again, delighted to be here. If we can move to the next slide, please. I just want to remind people that there's lots of different ways that you can actually get in contact and connect, and not just with the programme, but with the webinars themselves. If you do use Twitter, I would encourage you throughout the webinar or at any point today is to tell the rest of Scotland that you've actually been on this webinar and maybe some of the things that you've learned. The hashtags are there, hashtag ELC Improve, @CareInspect, and hashtag Lead for All. If you don't use Twitter and you want to get in contact with us, the 2 email addresses are there. If anything's shared today that maybe you want to come back to, please do email Lorna and colleagues at the SSC through leadership@sssc.uk.com, or if it's something more general to the programme, please do get in contact with us there. I'm also pleased to say that all our calls are recorded, not for a negative purpose in any other way than just allow you to listen to it back. We will be uploading each of the calls to our website for a short period of time. If you go to Google and you key in, just put in Care Inspector at Improvement Hub, and then there's a dedicated site there for early learning and childcare. The other thing that's available today that we will be using for reflections, for questions and other things is the chat facility. And we would encourage you, but if there's questions posed through the presentations today, please do put some thoughts, reflections. I know that last week we got some really good feedback in terms of how you're feeling as a sector. We had lots of different questions, but I think what came out was really quite clear in terms of your anxieties about the restart of the sector, and hopefully through the 5 weeks we're able to touch on that, specifically around week 5. As the guidance for early learning and childcare comes out on the 15th of June, we may take some time in week 5 to look at that and to look at some of the things that you've raised through the webinars. But before we go any further, I just want to say again that if there is any hiccups today, you know, we've no control over the technology, we've no control over the bandwidths or how many people in our house are using the music or streaming or whatever else. So if at any point our bandwidth as presenters goes down, please just bear with us for 30 seconds. And that's the same as yourself. If you need to log back in again, if there's any technical issues, please do. But I would encourage everybody to tweet as we go through the presentation. So it's great to be with you again. Next slide, please. It would offer to you, if anybody's joining us today that were not here last week or missed it, was that if you do attend the 5 webinars and you do take a little bit of time for reflection and you're able to share that with us, we'd be delighted to say that we'd welcome you and encourage you to apply for an open badge. The open badge is a great way of applying the learning, reflecting on the learning, and for us to see that the knowledge, the skills and the experiences that you've learned through these webinars have been something that you've taken on board. And more importantly, it's a great way for you in terms of whether it's revalidation or for continuous professional development. They're actually a great way for you to actually use as part of that annual appraisal or annual reflections that you've got in your respective sector and with your respective teams. If we can go to the next slide, please. So if I could just come back and share with you the 5-week programme content. I really enjoyed last week in terms of introducing quality improvement and getting started on the journey with you. Some of you joined us from far up in the country to far south to far west to far east, but some of you have also been to one of our learning sessions and seen a little bit of the messages around quality improvement. But for some of you, this will be your first stab in getting started in terms of your quality improvement journey. So hopefully we've just taken a little bit of time last week to give you a little bit of theory, to give you a little bit of background in terms of where we'll be going through the programme and how we'll be supporting you. Week 2 and 3, I'm delighted to say that we've got our colleagues from the SSSC that will be looking specifically today around the management and leadership themes, and next week we're looking about support, supervision, coaching, mentoring. Week 4, we really want to get into what's the problem. When we're starting out in the journey, we're not getting to the testing stage, we're not getting to the implementation, but what is the actual thing that's causing us the issues? I mean, the webinars are a good way to respond to the fact that the sector is mainly, I know that there's some activity hubs across Scotland on the go just now, but mainly the sector is paused. So the issues that we went in before the pause will be the same issues that are there as we come back out. So can we have a little bit of thought around that? And week 4 specifically is about that. And I'm delighted to say that we've got our colleagues from the Children and Young People's Improvement Collaborative to do that. As I've touched on, week 5 is over to you. Week 5 is open at this moment in time to maybe look at that a little bit coaching and support for you, but we may also take the time to go into a little bit more thematic detail, as we know that the guidance for the early learning and childcare sector will be out by that point. And the other thing is we tried to take a little bit of a temperature check last week in terms of how you're feeling about the restart. So maybe there's issues there in the questions that are posed that we could tackle throughout the weeks, but also maybe more specifically in week 5. Next slide, please. As I touched on last week, what we did before we started to get into the implementation side of the programme, my colleagues Fiona and Vicky took some time to look over the 240 inspections that at that point in September were not meeting what we would look at as the national standard, the quality part of it. So if we break that down further, what we looked at more specifically was that the key theme, the key area that was coming out time and time again, where people were falling down, was around the management and leadership theme. Now, what we want to do today is really look at more specifically and start that journey around some of the key things, thinking, theory around management and leadership. It's to get us started. It won't end the journey, it will just start the journey today. And before I hand over to my colleagues in the SSSC, I've been lucky enough to look at another sector just now as part of the national role that I'm involved in, and that sector is the National Health Service. They're probably around 6 to 8 weeks further ahead than where we are in terms of their restart. Yes, it's not ELC, but there's things there that we could actually learn. And some of the key lessons coming out in terms of their restart is that in terms of before COVID, in terms of coming out, the speed of decision making is a lot quicker. It's a lot faster. Now that people will say, well, yeah, that's probably going to be the case, but it is, and nobody ever expected it to be that, you know, in terms of that. And I would imagine that would be the same for the early learning and childcare sector, that the speed of your decision making will be a lot faster when the restart starts to happen. One of the other things that they also said was that you need to have good communications with both your teams, both your people, and both the people using services. And for you, that would be your parents and carers. So I would start to think about some of the learning within that. One of the other things that I would suppose that would apply to the early learning and childcare sector that they've learned is that they need to be more flexible in terms of their uses of space. And I think as we start to look at the guidance, start to look at the restart, we'll need to think about that as well. But one of the most important things that they found that through COVID approach, some of the approaches that they've applied to COVID and some of the things that they've learned in the restart in the 6 to 8 weeks, is that one of the most important things is the health and well-being of their staff. And again, I would encourage us all to think about it is that, yes, management leadership is a theme in itself, but one of the most important facets about that is our health and well-being of our staff. And I would just urge people to think about that as being one of the most important facets, that when we're starting to think about the sector, that this is one of key things that we're thinking about. I just wanted to share with you some of the recap for last week, some of the context for going forward. And I really look forward to Lorna and the guys at the SSC giving us a little bit of an insight into thinking and theories and management leadership and how they apply to the early learning and childcare sector. So thank you once again, and over to Lorna.
Thank you, Craig, and for a lovely introduction there. Hello from me. So we have a gallery of photographs on the screen here. I'm Lorna Dalton. I'm an advisor with the SSC, and I'm joined on the webinar today by Alison Precup and Jess Alexander. It's great to be part of this and be working with the Care Inspectorate. You may have worked with me or Jess or Alison in the past, and hopefully you'll continue to work with us in the future. A test of change for me at the moment in my improvement journey. This is a very new way of us engaging with the sector, delivering webinars. So I'm sure things will be good, but we can also learn how to do things better from our experience today. Your improvement needs, as Craig said, may be changing during lockdown and as part of recovery, and that might include your needs around improving leadership and management. So hopefully for the next 30 minutes or so, this is a time just to start reflecting on some of your needs. We're aware of staff fears and anxieties about restarting, moving back into services that have been closed down, and that might change your focus of leadership and management improvement as well. But welcome, and I'll move us on. So today, what we're going to cover today is really just that focus on the context of building leadership capabilities. Very importantly, recognising the difference between leadership and management. That's something that the SSC have been working on over the last few years. Some of the resources, SSC have got a vast range of resources that's available for you to use for free. So we just wanted to let you know that they're there. And just to invite you to think a bit more logically about what improvements are needed within your service from a leadership and management point of view. And just go back to what Craig was saying last week in terms of why we're focusing on leadership and management. It's going to be the people who get you to where you need to be in your improvement journey. And that will only be achieved through effective leadership and management. And very much we promote that leadership and management, if it's effective, it gives time and space within services in order to listen to people and to build relationships. And going back to what Craig has just said, really focusing on the well-being of staff that's working within your services. So this is where I hope technology supports me, but I wanted to show you a very short video from our Director of Development and Innovation in the SSC, Philip Gillespie. And we asked him to role model a little bit of what we ask people in the sector to do and to talk about what effective leadership means to him. So I'll just try and share that video with you just now.
Lorna, there's no sound coming through.
Will I stop it? I'm sorry, I've had to stop sharing this just now. I've been told that there's no sound coming through. Can I just try and share it with you again, and hopefully I'll remember to press the audio button. I'm sorry about this.
When I think of effective leadership, I think of behaviours and values. I'm reminded of this crane, and this crane is a miniature version of 2 cranes in Belfast in the shipyard that oversee the skyline in Belfast. And this is really my Northern Star. For me, this represents who I'm about, how I've been influenced, and the values I've been brought up with, and what's shaped me. I'm Philip Gillespie, and I'm the Director of Development and Innovation. Probably at the start of my leadership management journey, I was driven by the whole notion of having to know everything. That changed, and I became much more comfortable about not knowing, not having to know, and surrounding myself with people who are more talented than myself. And I see my job as a leader and manager as being able to facilitate development and growth in individuals. My greatest strength is building really effective relationships with partners that we work with, because the work that we do has to be about collaborating, partnership, compromise, and most importantly, being able to influence and listen to what the social services sector says. Probably the area I'd like to develop more is around self-leadership and having a bit more time for reflection. And I'm quite a self-contained person, and I like to do things myself, and I'm very resilient. I'm very strong, very driven, but sometimes that's a weakness in myself. Sometimes I need to ask for help and do more of that. For people coming into first-line management or their first post in management or leadership, I think what's really important is to understand that you've got the staff, you've got all the skills and the knowledge and the technical abilities. So thinking about, do I need to know everything? Do I need to know every technical detail of the work? Or do I need to try and facilitate for my staff the right conditions for them to reach their potential? For leaders, it's about being able to manage and support people through constant change, and just be comfortable with the fact that there is constant change and embrace that.
So that was Philip Gillespie talking about effective leadership. I'll just try and get back onto my slides now. And just to recap, I mean, we develop these resources for you to use in your services to hopefully support you to have a conversation and ask those questions. What does effective leadership mean in the service you're working in? And just, you know, Philip was talking about being surrounded by people more talented than him. He doesn't need to know all the answers. How he takes time to build those effective relationships, and importantly, looking at his own leadership, that self-leadership, and embracing change, because we know that change is always constant. And so I would just, I suppose, invite you to use this resource. What does this mean for you in your setting? How are you recognising talent in the service you're working in? And how are you supporting that leadership at all levels? And we're told that 80% of any improvement that takes place is really dependent on that investment in relationships. So again, I suppose from a leadership management point of view, just emphasising and asking you to reflect on where's the time and space for you to invest in relationships. Just a reminder, most people on the webinar will probably be familiar with these frameworks, but the Care Inspectorate's quality framework very much asks how good is our leadership, how good is our staff teams, and the blueprint expansion for early learning and childcare very much focuses on staffing, leadership and management within criteria 1. But I think for the last few slides and listening to Craig, we use the terms leadership and management very interchangeably. And we've been working certainly in the last couple of years with people in the sector, really asking them to just reflect on what that difference is between leadership and management. There are some very distinctive skills between the two, and there are some that overlap between the two. And when you're looking at your improvement journey, are you looking to improve the leadership qualities within your service? Or are you looking to improve the management skills? And typically, management's focusing on the processes that support you to have the organisation running smoothly. So your planning, your staffing, your budgeting, your solving problems. And leadership is establishing the vision, taking people with you, motivating, inspiring people, embracing that change, as Philip talked about, and having time to reflect on yourself and to reflect on others. And I think there's a phrase that says, you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. So as you start embarking on that improvement within leadership and management, we would ask you just to take some time to think about what is the difference between leadership and management. Just a bit of context, we have a leadership strategy for social services in Scotland. That does come to an end in this year, but the priorities within that strategy will still continue. And the priorities there are to support strategic leaders across the sector, how we promote leadership at all levels within services, how we develop and embed resources to help people develop leadership, and how we all evaluate the difference that we're making. Leadership development can be a big investment, but we need to know that it's making a difference and for the right reasons. You'll see at the bottom of the slide that this strategy was developed in partnership, so it's not just a SSSC strategy. And I would just invite you probably to download and read this. It's about 15 pages, not an onerous strategy to read, but just to give you a little bit of a context and a partnership as to what we're all working towards to develop leadership. Importantly, from that strategy comes 6 leadership capabilities, which you can see on the screen, and a set of organisational capabilities in terms of how we support organisations to support learning and development and staff's health and well-being, linking back to what Craig was saying earlier. But the 6 leadership capabilities that you can see there really define the values, behaviours and attitudes of effective leadership in any social service in Scotland. And again, I suppose our invite from the SSSC is you can use these as a resource to support a change and an improvement. You can talk about how you place these behaviours in practice. How does it strengthen relationships? And how do you embed these terms within your language, within your service? We see these capabilities being used in one-to-one supervision. So before we have a next supervision, come thinking of a time when you've really displayed one of these capabilities very well, or come thinking of a time when you could have done something a little bit better. Could you have motivated and inspired a child or parents better? Could you be more creative and innovative within the nursery setting? Some services have been using them as a point of recruitment. They use them in annual appraisals. They can use them in team meetings to help to structure an agenda. They can use them for individual learning and development. And indeed, some people have used them as part of exit interviews as well. And it really just does ground leadership within your service in a day-to-day basis. And you can use these, as we did with Philip Gillespie, to talk about, ask your colleagues. So out of these 6 capabilities, which one do you think is your strength and why? And out of these 6 capabilities, which one do you think you could develop a little bit more? And how could you develop that a little bit more? So again, there's a resource. We're offering that for you to go away and help to start reflecting on your leadership and management. If we were face-to-face in a room, we would probably ask people to put up their hands as to who knows about this resource we have, Step Into Leadership. It's a website which supports you to learn and develop round about your leadership and management. It was developed by the sector. They asked us to put anything pertinent to leadership development for social services into one place. And it invites you and it invites any colleague to look at, even people using services, to look at your current leadership every day, ask you to some reflection round about that. It then asks you to seek some feedback from other people, and there's a 360-degree feedback tool in this website. It's the only part of the website that requires a password, which you administer yourself. And then once you've done the reflection, you've gained your feedback, it asks you then to look at how you're going to develop your leadership in the future, and offers a whole range of resources to support you with that learning and development. And very hot off the press, as in the last week, we have just added a Leading in Crisis resource to the homepage of Step Into Leadership. You may be interested to go and access that. And in the green box you can see, which says Leadership in Practice, we've added a couple of new videos. Some are practice examples from people working recently in the COVID-19 situation. But again, I suppose an invite from me to you today is to just go and have a look and be curious and have a look at this website and see what's in there. A couple of years ago, we developed a resource specifically for middle managers. The term middle manager and who's a middle manager varies between organisations, but typically they would have an eye to the operations and supporting workforce and frontline delivery. But they would also have an eye to supporting senior leaders and that strategic direction of your service. And I think some managers at that time describe themselves as the jam in the middle, and sometimes their learning and development needs can get a bit neglected. So we developed this framework, which is a self-directed framework for managers. There's 9 learning areas. You can do them all, you can do one, you don't have to do them logically. It depends on what your learning needs are. And each one of these areas of learning carries an open badge. And for those who don't know about open badges, they provide some digital recognition for the learning and development that you've done, more of the informal learning and development. But again, from today, you might ask, does this have a place in your service to promote improvements in your leadership and management? Sorry. The SSSC have a wide range of resources, and some people on the webinar may already be familiar with them and others may not. So when you're looking at developing your leadership and management, people will have different needs. But I would invite you, I'm not going to go through all the resources that we have, but here's a snapshot. So we have a learning zone, and I would invite you to go to the learning zone. There's a whole array of digital learning on there, including apps specifically for children's services. And I think I've highlighted 2 or 3 there. Observing children, child development and communication skills. We have a continuous learning framework and the codes of practice and making better decisions. So again, just go and just have a look. I'll probably start with the Learning Zone or the Step into Leadership website first of all. And very hot off the press, for those that do Twitter, you'll see in the last couple of weeks, we've been tweeting about our 23 Things Leadership resource. This provides bite-sized learning bite-sized learning activities, 23 of them, and it's structured around about Step into Leadership. But in the last couple of weeks, sorry, I'm getting a bit of a dry throat. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen a phenomenal rise in applications from early learning and childcare services, which has been very encouraging. And each of these activities carries an open badge, and we really are seeking some reflection from workers about what is it that they're learning about all these 23 aspects of leadership. You might just want to be interested in doing thing 1 or thing 2 or thing 3, but again, this is a resource that you can take back and encourage your colleagues to look at yourself, see how this might fit with supporting learning and development in your service. And so before we start looking at your journey of improvement for leadership and management, we wanted to introduce you to this leadership logic model for those that haven't seen it. This was developed by the University of Stirling with a group of people working in social services, asking the question, what does good leadership look like in Scotland social services? So it should help you to reflect and evaluate where you are just now. And if you're starting on an improvement journey, it's very important to start looking at your baseline. Where is it you're starting on your journey? And so the first column, what do good leaders need? That's really asking you to look at your cultures, your environments. Sorry. The next 3 columns ask you to look at, so what do good leaders bring and do, and how do they engage in your service? What are those capabilities that you have right now or you may need to develop in the future? And very importantly, the last 3 columns is about the impact that we're making. if we're investing in improving leadership and management, then so what? What's the difference that we're going to make from that? How are people going to respond? What's the difference it's going to make? And what are those outcomes? And when you're looking at reflecting and evaluating on your leadership, we ask you to also think about what in your service is enabling that good leadership to happen, or what may enable that good leadership to happen. And we also ask you to look at what are the risks and barriers that's stopping you developing leadership or may stop you developing leadership going forward. So again, this is available on Step Into Leadership and on the SSSC website, but we're finding that a lot of services are really welcoming this as a logical way of evaluating and reflecting on their leadership in their service. And 3 important questions, improvement questions that we wanted to just ground within leadership and management, and probably would ask you to take these 3 questions away after today. So thinking specifically about improving outcomes for children and building leadership capabilities, what is it you're trying to accomplish by improving leadership and management in your service? And we're going to open up the chat box, and this is about establishing your vision. Where is it you're wanting to go? And so in the chat box, we're going to ask you to just reflect on that question 1. Don't overthink it, just what is it you're trying to accomplish if you're improving leadership and management in your service?
Lorna, my apologies, but the Q&A is not coming up. I wonder if it would be possible if the participants, any questions that they've got, if they could email them to the ELC Improve mailbox and we could pick them up.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm being told in the background that the chat box and the question and answer box isn't working. So they're wanting you to, any questions or reflections that you have, if you can email them to the contacts that Craig gave you earlier this morning, and we'll share those contacts with you again later today. So again, this is all a test of change for me. So I would ask you to, because I'm really interested in what this answer is to question 1. What are we trying to accomplish by improving leadership management in our service? How are you going to know that any change is going to result in an improvement? And what change can you make that will result in that improvement in how you lead and manage within your service? 3 questions. You might just want to go away and ask your colleagues, ask yourself those questions. So recently we've had services working with us about defining a high-performing manager. How do we really improve how we see leadership at all levels? How do we really improve supervision experiences for people? Or how do we improve the relationships within the service? How do we improve how we engage within the service? So 3 questions, but if you're interested in, if you'd like to answer the first question and send that back in an email to one of the inboxes, we'd be delighted to receive that. So a big focus of next week's webinar is supervision and support. And I suppose a lot of time at the SSSC in our team has been spent in the last couple of years working with people on looking at increasing and improving supervision experiences, because it very much is at the heart of effective leadership. Sorry, it's not just about the frequency of supervision, but it's really about what are the quality experiences. And I'm not going to go into it in any great detail because my colleagues Jess and Alison are going to cover that next week. But again, on Step Into Leadership, we have this section, and behind each of these green boxes, there's lots more information about supervision, mentoring and coaching. And we'll probably ask you to look at how, sorry, what other systems you've got in place which may support supervision. So in your service, you might do mentoring very well or coaching very well. But again, just a time to look at which one is more dominant and predominant in your service and which one you would like to probably improve on. And for next week, we were just wondering, thinking about your recovery stage, some of the anxieties, some of the fears, where your staff morale is at the moment. before next week, could we maybe set a wee piece of homework, which is to go into Think 15, and we will send the links out. But if you just Google SSC Think 15 leadership, you'll find it. And maybe just go and explore Think 15. You might even want to apply for an open badge. But I think Jess is going to pick this up with you next week in terms of what supervision is and why do we do it at all when we're thinking about improving leadership and management. So I think I've kind of blundered my way through some of that and coughed my way through some of that. I apologise. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining us this morning. And please get in touch. We'd be delighted to hear from you. We're going to share these slides and these links. And the plan was to now have a bit of time to do some reflections and some questions. Tracy, can I just ask if that's open now?
Unfortunately not, Lorna.
Okay.
If there's any questions, if they could put them to the ELC mailbox, and we'll look at them in that way. But okay. For today, unfortunately, the Q&A is not coming up.
Okay, so I think I just have to say goodbye there because I'm being told that the Q&A box isn't working today. But any questions that you have, any reflections that you have, you can make those directly to the ELC inbox at the Care Inspectorate. So I think it's just for me to say we wish you well on your improvement journey for leadership and management. We're around and we're contactable for you to get in touch with us for any support. But for now, thank you and goodbye.